This is the Sony FX3, and this video is going to be one of my easiest camera reviews ever because I've already reviewed this camera, just in a different outer shell. Let's get undone.
Gerald Undone. He's crazy.
What's happening, everybody? I'm Gerald Undone, and I micromanage macro details. Okay, as usual, some disclosure. Sony lent me this FX3 to make this video. I do not get to keep it. No money changed hands, and Sony does not get any input on this video's production or get to preview it before it's posted. This video does have a sponsor though, and that's Storyblocks. Now, as you probably already deduced from my intro and the title of this video, the FX3 is essentially the same camera as the A7S III, but I want to add some clarity to that assertion to prevent any misunderstanding. When I say the FX3 is the same camera as the A7S III, I don't mean for all intents and purposes it functions the same. I mean it literally has the exact same camera inside of this chassis. It's the same sensor, processor, LCD screen, IBIS system, card slots, UI, etc. That means you're getting exactly the same image, recording modes, codecs, battery, powering options, and port functionality. From an end result standpoint, it's the same camera. There are differences, but they're entirely based on ergonomics and design. So let's talk about those now. First off, it's gray, which more closely matches the rest of the FX line. And it does have a different on-off switch. It's now on the back, and it looks like the FX6's, instead of wrapping around the shutter button, because that's now a zoom control, which is actually pretty cool, and you can even use it for clear image zoom if you want. But honestly, that's where the similarities between this camera and the FX series stop. Going back to it being an A7S III, that means it does not have shutter angle, DCI 4K, true 24p, ND filters, or even face-only autofocus, all of which are features we get on the FX6 and FX9, but not on the FX3. Those not being here make this camera feel more like a cosmetic-only addition to the cinema line. It does have tally lights on the front and back though, which is nice, and they are configurable in the menu. And the biggest change from the A7S III is probably the fact that this camera now has a fan. The vents for that fan apparently will not compromise your weather sealing, and the fan is also configurable in the menu, allowing for several modes, including completely off. What's great about this is that if you turn the fan completely off, the camera essentially operates like an A7S III with regard to heat dissipation, which for me was always problem-free, but if you're someone who tends to operate their camera in much hotter environments, or if you had problems with the A7S III, you now have the option to enable the fan, which will help with cooling, and is actually very quiet. I forgot I even had it on during a few of my tests. Actually, here, have a listen. Turn the camera on. Yeah, it's so quiet. I'm gonna put this right up to the microphone. To be honest, I can't even hear it holding it this far away. Now again, I had no issues with my A7S III overheating, but it's nice to see that they went the extra mile for reliability here, given that a cinema line product should suggest reliability, in my opinion. There are a couple other small changes to the menu. Just like the Alpha 1, the power save start time can now be set to never allow the camera to go to sleep. This is a new change to the last two Sony cameras, whereas cameras prior to that had a 30-minute maximum for that setting. And other than that, the menu is exactly the same, except for the fact that there's no viewfinder options because this camera doesn't have an electronic viewfinder. But it does still have the same photo modes as the A7S III. You just access them using this mode button on the back now instead of a top dial. So this camera is very capable of taking the same 12 megapixel stills as the Sony A7S III, but you'll be forced to use the LCD screen, which as I mentioned is the same fully articulating panel from the A7S III. And despite the rest of the menu being the same, you cannot copy settings from an A7S III to the FX3 if you're planning to do that. One benefit this camera does have by not being too much like the FX6 or FX9 though, is that it uses the A7S III's white balance tool, which is so much better than the cinema line alternatives. It's very accurate with precise control, and as expected, it calculates the white balance exactly the same as the A7S III, so you can set them identically if you're mixing those two cameras. And the same is true for color in general. The images out of this camera are identical to the A7S III's. Same color science, same skin tones, and exactly the same dynamic range. I busted out the Xyla 21 from DSC Labs to test the dynamic range just to make sure, and I got the same result as the A7S III. But more on that later because I want to update you on my dynamic range tests in general at the end of this video. The only difference pertaining to color is that the FX3 has S-Cinetone, which I've been asking Sony to add to the A7S III for a while now, and I feel like its inclusion on the FX3 all but guarantees that we'll see it added to the A7S III soon, because this proves that there are no barriers preventing it since the cameras are fundamentally the same. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw an update from Sony shortly announcing S-Cinetone for the A7S III. And at that point, there will be no differences between the images these two cameras can produce. Now there are some other differences to the body. The record button is bigger and illuminated. The joystick is on top, which is weird if you take a photographer's grip, and only really works if you shoot more from the hip and rotate your wrist up to compensate. The rest of the controls are mostly the same, but they've changed the default assignments for the buttons to prioritize video, such as adding peaking and zebra controls to the D-pad. And the ports are all the same, but this camera doesn't come with that HDMI bracket thing that the A7S III came with, so out of the box, your HDMI port is actually less protected on the FX3. There is a mounting hole directly above it though, so perhaps a third-party accessory will address that in the future. Actually, there's quite a few mounting points on this body. There's 5 quarter-20s spread across the top, 2 of which are used to attach the included top handle, which first slides into the multi-interface shoe and then is screwed down. The handle then replaces those 2 now occupied holes with 3 new ones on the grip, and of course also includes the audio interface. Now, this module is effectively the XLR K3M that many people, including myself, are currently using with their A7S III. There are 3 differences though. First, there's a selector switch on the side of the handle to enable or disable the K3M part without needing to remove the handle, which is smart. This basically switches between the analog 3.5mm port built into the body and the digital audio from the module. You cannot use both at the same time, but there is a 3.5mm port on the K3M that you can use while the handle is activated. Secondly, unlike the actual XLR K3M, there's no selector switch on this module for analog and digital. It just always appears to be in digital mode. And lastly, the big one, the microphone that comes with the XLR K3M is not included with this camera, it's just the interface. As you might expect, the audio from this thing sounds exactly like the K3M, but here, have a listen to both while I switch back and forth between this one and the XLR K3M on my Sony A7S III while I tell you about today's sponsor, Storyblocks. Check, check. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you could really use some footage, but shooting yourself was either budgetarily or logistically unfeasible? Well, Storyblocks has you covered with an impressive collection of stock footage, covering a wide range of subjects with unlimited downloads and 4K video. We're also amply supplied with backgrounds, overlays, and After Effects templates, and the interface is easy to use and navigate, and the clips are royalty-free for both personal and commercial use, so you can use them as much as you want, wherever you want. So if you think you could take advantage of a fantastic library of quality stock footage and effects, check out Storyblocks using the link in the description below. Now, while we're talking about audio, I wanted to provide a little update to the 24-bit audio codec issue I raised in my A7S III follow-up video. I mentioned that the 24-bit audio coming from the K3M was not playing back in most NLEs, save for the latest beta of Premiere. Well, since then, DaVinci Resolve has added support for that codec, so if you edit in Resolve, you can safely use the 24-bit audio from either of these cameras now without needing to rewrap your audio file. So that's good. And lastly, before we conclude, I want to tell you a bit more about my dynamic range update. I was talking with Gunter from cine the other day about the occasional half-stop disparity between our different dynamic range test results, and thanks to Gunter's suggestions, I made some tweaks to the way I run my tests in order to better match the results that cine gets. This should make it easier to compare results more usefully moving forward, but this of course means that my results are about half a stop more conservative now than they used to be, placing both the A7S III and the FX3 around 12.5 stops in S-Log3 instead of the 13 stops I originally measured. The dynamic range of the cameras didn't change, of course, and they're both still excellent. It's just the scoring system that's been revised. Interestingly though, when I reran the Alpha 1 test, it still scored very high at 13.1 stops. This is likely due to the noise improvement that comes from oversampling and or binning 8K footage, but I was impressed by this result considering I was using the new, more challenging Cine method. Anyway, I just wanted to throw in that update, but now let's wrap up and talk about value on the FX3. So overall, I like this camera. I mean, of course I do. I called the A7S III a technical masterpiece, so how could I not love this camera? It's an A7S III, but more video focused. I really like the body design. I think it's functional and looks great. I like the top handle, the port doors, and the texture of the chassis. My only complaint would be that they didn't lean hard enough into the video-centric aspects to make this camera serve a real purpose. Without DCI 4K, true 24p, or shutter angle, why should you even care about this camera over the A7S III, which is cheaper? Now, if the FX3 was cheaper, it'd be a no-brainer. But currently, it's a more expensive body without a viewfinder. So what it really comes down to is if you need that audio module. If you're planning on buying the A7S III and the XLR K3M and don't use the viewfinder, then the FX3 will actually save you a couple $100. In that case, it's the right call. But if not, you should probably just stick to the A7S III. Sony told me their concept for this camera was to give people a more accessible starting point to their FX line. Perhaps before that target user had the budget or confidence to move up to an FX6 or FX9, they could start here. And there definitely are some design elements here that remind me of the FX6, but I don't think that it's quite enough to call this part of the cinema line. It's still definitely as good of a camera as it was when I reviewed the A7S III back in July, but there's just not really anything new here to get excited about. Peter, how's it going?
Hey man, how's it going?
All right, listen up. I'm working on my FX3 video right now, and it's a little bit shorter than I wanted it to be, so I figured, we should extend the runtime a little bit, but I didn't have anything else to talk about, so I thought I would give you a call. You've got the FX3, right?
Oh yeah, I've been using it for a week, so.
Are you gonna post a video same day? Are you gonna post a video, I guess, today? Are my viewers gonna see a video from you today?
Absolutely.
So I'd love to hear your thoughts on the camera. Just need to, extend the runtime a little bit. So what do you think of the FX3 so far?
Well, I think it's a great camera, but there's this one thing that no one else is talking about, and that is especially...
Okay, you know what, Peter? That's perfect. That's all I needed from you. I think that we've got all the time we need. Really appreciate your help, and I will catch you later, buddy. But that's going to be it for me. I hope you found this video entertaining, or at least helpful. And if you did, make sure to leave the old thumbs up and consider subscribing if you haven't already. But if you did not find this video helpful or entertaining, try setting the playback speed to 75%. Yeah, all right. I'm done.